Hopefully everything is going well, and hopefully you'll be able to see me now. Brilliant. Hello, everybody. Where is everybody from today? Let's have a look and see who's around. I know some of you are waiting. Right, how are we doing? So we're going to be looking at the heart today, which is a fantastic topic, really, really interesting. And I hope that we're going to have a few of you ready to join us. I can see that there's a few people waiting, so hopefully you'll all be joining me in a moment. Don't forget, this is going to be available on YouTube so that you can always have a look back at it. And while we're waiting for people to join us, I'm just going to start getting the web class up and running. So is anybody there where is everybody from? I can see that there's some people who are watching now. Can you say hello? Can you all hear me okay? Hopefully you can. So let's have a look. Let's start sharing this then, shall we? So I'll just get this up and running so you can see what we're doing. Ah, hello from Scotland. Fantastic. I'm actually from Scotland, believe it or not. So hopefully this is going to come up in a minute and you'll be able to see what we're doing. There we go. All right. So hopefully you can all see that. Brilliant. Yeah, that's coming up now, isn't it? Can you all see that okay? So we've got Manchester. Hello. Brilliant. Right, well, this can be regarded as triple or combined. It's got a mixture of things for OCR, AQA, EdXL. The heart covers pretty much all of the courses. I will point out when it belongs to certain parts, like some of you need to know the valves in the heart and some of you don't, and I'll explain who needs to see those and who doesn't and know them. Okay, from Brazil, but living in Spain, studying nursing here. Wow, that's interesting. Hello, brilliant. Hi, Trevor. And Beyonce and Maya. I always have some Mayas and some Mayas when I'm teaching. So should we get on with this and see how we're doing? All right, and see how much you remember about the heart. Like I said, it is a topic that comes up in our combined and triple sciences, and it's good for preparing for A-level as well because it's covered on a lot of the A-level topics too. So welcome today to the GCSE Biology web class, and it's on the heart and the circulatory system. Like I said, a really interesting topic. So hopefully you will all enjoy it today. Please do join in, won't you? Oh, hello from Lincolnshire. Fantastic. Hello from Lincolnshire. I used to live in Lincolnshire. So there we go. So that's Jessica. Hello, Jessica. So it will be interesting to see how much of you can remember about the heart and the circulatory system. So what we're going to start off with, I'll introduce myself because some of you have been to my classes before and some of you haven't. So I'm Philippa. I'm the lead GCSE biology teacher here at Snap Revise. I've got a BSc in animal science. I've got a PGCE in biology and games, both from the University of Leeds. I've just finished as teacher and head of biology. I've got 25 years experience of education, and I now do content writing for biology on board online platforms. And I'm really enthusiastic about biology, so hopefully you'll all enjoy the classes. I've been an exam marker for Key Stage 3 GCSE and A-level, so I've got a good idea about the answering of exam questions. And I've also written for Zigzag Education and CGP, one of those books that a lot of people use at their schools. Hello. So, first of all, let's look at the objectives. It's always important to look at the objectives. So we're going to describe the structure and function of veins, arteries, and capillaries. And we are going to describe the circulatory system. And we are going to look at the structure and function of the human heart. Things that you're not going to cover today. We're not going to be talking about the response to exercise, which quite a few people need to cover in their courses. This will be covered at another stage, and the effect of hormones on heart rate, like adrenaline. So with AQA, we've already covered the lungs in diffusion in living organisms class. So you've got this section of the heart and the blood vessels, 4.2.2.2. Hopefully you're all downloading your syllabus off your relevant exam board website, because it's really important to see what you need to cover and how you've covered it. All right. OCR, again, here we go. We've got describe the human circulatory system and explain the structure of the heart and the blood vessels, how they're adapted to their functions. And then we've got EdXL, the need for our transport system. We've already talked about the exchange surfaces of the lungs, the structure of the blood vessels in relation to their function, and the structure of the heart and circulatory system. So, here we go. So AQA 4.2.2, OCR, describing the human circulatory system and the structure of the heart and blood vessels. And then EdXL, explain the need for exchange surface and transport, the blood vessels in relation to their function, and the heart and circulatory system. It was being a bit slow to move on, I can see. All right. So what do we already know about the heart? First of all, something that we mentioned when we were talking about the lungs was, why do we need these specialized exchange surfaces and transport systems? We are multicellular, we're very large, so why do you think we need a transport system, whereas an amoeba doesn't? Has anybody got any idea? So an amoeba, a unicellular organism, doesn't require a transport system. It gets all it needs from its surroundings, but just by the diffusion of substances between and osmosis between the surroundings and the amoeba. But we need a transport system. We need this circulatory system, which is carrying things around our body. Has anybody got any idea why we need a circulatory system? Let's see what you can come up with. Have any of you got any ideas? So obviously we're very large, all right? We're very complex, and we are made up of millions of cells, aren't we? So we need to get these substances to all of our cells around our body, all right? And we can't just rely on diffusion from the outside to our center, because that's too far a distance, isn't it? We have a brilliant, yes, we have a multicellular structure, and we have a larger metabolic rate, or a higher metabolic rate. So we're very, very active, aren't we? So we need lots of energy, and for that we need oxygen and glucose. Yep, so we need our organs to help us to carry out their particular functions to allow us to be able to survive, all right? And all of those functions require energy, and we need that energy to get to all of, for all of our cells. So we need to release that energy by respiration, which is using oxygen and glucose, which for an amoeba, the oxygen will diffuse through its cell surface membrane, but for us, we need it carrying around the body. All right, so to overcome the limitations of diffusion, because diffusion can only occur across a short distance, a short diffusion distance, can't it? To sufficiently supply the cells in tissues with molecules that are needed to make new, like amino acids, to make new proteins, but also to remove wastes so that wastes don't build up, because if waste builds up, that becomes toxic, doesn't it? And that can kill us, all right? So we need to remove the waste as well. So describe the structure and the function of the lungs. The reason why we're putting this in is because obviously the exchange surfaces and the transport system work closely together, don't they? All right. So thinking about what we have covered in the past, and we've talked about the diffusion across exchange surfaces. Can anybody tell me what are the main, say, the tubes in the lungs? All right. So the main one that goes down from our mouth, then that branches. Can anybody say what any of those are by any chance? Great if you can. So you always think of it like it's an upside down tree, all right? So it's a tree, so you've got the trunk, which then branches into two main branches that then branch, which then branch, which then branch, and end up in these little sacs at the end. Yeah, bronchioles. Yeah, be careful with, yeah, the spelling's quite tricky. Alveoli, bronchioles, excellent. So we start with the trachea, the trunk. The trachea is the trunk. Then it branches into the two bronchi, bronchi, which then branch into smaller branches called bronchioles. Excellent. And then these end up in those things that look a little bit like bunches of grapes, don't they? And they're little air sacs called alveoli, not ravioli, like some people get confused with. So alveoli. And surrounding those alveoli is a really good capillary network, which are our small blood vessels. So we've got this really good capillary network around it. And so this allows for gas exchange between the alveoli and capillaries. Okay, brilliant. Well done, everybody. So let's move on then and start our part of the circulatory system. So we're going to start off with the blood vessels, which actually carry the blood around the body. So we've got these various different blood vessels. Can anybody write down the three main types of blood vessels for me? Anybody got any idea? That would be fantastic to see. See whether we can come up with that. So what have we got? Veins, capillaries, and arteries. Fantastic. Well done, Nikki. All right. So veins, capillaries, and arteries. So we're going to start with the first ones, the arteries, which leave the heart. These arteries away. That's how I always remember it. Arteries away from the heart. All right. So arteries carry blood away from the heart. Can anybody give me any other information about arteries while I write this down? Does anybody know anything else about arteries for me? Because they're really, really important, aren't they? The aorta, aorta is our main one. High pressure. And they have to have thick walls. Good, because if they had thin walls, they'd just burst, wouldn't they? All right. Thick, elasticated walls to withstand high pressure. That's a fantastic response. So well done, Flo. Well done, Nikki. Peso, it carries blood in high pressure. Fantastic. So it's high blood pressure because the blood is getting pumped out of the heart directly into the arteries. So it's under high pressure. And if they had thin walls, then they'd just burst, wouldn't they? So they have, and this was said by Nikki, it's a thick layer of muscle and elastic tissue. Great stuff. Now, what about the inner part of it? Does anybody know about the size of this lumen. Now, the lumen is the center of a pipe, all right? So it's just basically the gap in the middle. So it's the air, the bit that the blood flows through is the lumen. It's the bit in the middle. Does anybody know what size that lumen is compared to the thickness of the wall? Has anybody got any idea? And as the blood goes in, it expands, doesn't it? The 1 cell thick is actually the capillaries. The capillary wall is 1 cell thick, all right? This one has got lots and lots of cells in its outer side because it's made up of muscle, and muscle is a tissue which is made up of lots of cells. And the elastic layer is also made of lots of cells. So what happens is the lumen, the bit in the middle, but well, good. I'm really pleased that you're all trying really hard to answer it, because it doesn't matter what anybody says. We just need to make sure that you all understand what's being, what is happening in this structure. So the middle bit is narrow. It's a narrow lumen or a small lumen. I prefer the word narrow. As an exam marker, I would prefer narrow. A narrow lumen compared to its thickness of its wall. So if you look at the thickness of its wall compared to the inside, so if we just looked at this here, look at the thickness of that wall, and then you look at the thickness of, or the width of the lumen is quite small compared to the thickness of the wall. All right. So we will now compare this. Oh, didn't mean to do that. There we go. All right. Small lumen. Okay, let's move on then. So we can compare that to the veins, can't we? Now, the veins are the ones that, what do the veins do? Well, the narrow lumen doesn't really help. It's just, it happens to be, it's relatively narrow because the blood is being forced into it, and it really needs thick walls, and it's only got a limited space to be in. And so the lumen just happens to be smaller, but it does widen as the blood goes in because they're elastic. So they expand and allow the blood through. And then, of course, they're a bit like an elastic band, the walls of the artery. So they'll expand as the blood goes in, which increases the size of the lumen, and then it recoils and it helps push the blood along. So actually having a relatively small lumen will allow that pushing. So you get this pulse where they expand, take the blood moves through, all right, and then they recoil, which helps push the rest of the blood through. So it helps with the movement of the blood, all right? So that's a really good question, Nikki. All right, I hope that makes sense. So the expansion, then the recoiling of the elastic helps push the blood through, and that's what we get with our pulse, don't we? All right. So carries blood to the heart. Yes, very good. Yeah. So veins carry blood to the heart. Now, on the whole, they don't carry oxygenated blood. They actually carry deoxygenated blood because the blood's gone all the right way around the body. So the arteries have left the heart with the oxygenated blood normally, and it carries it all the way around the body. All right. The oxygen then goes to the cells and is used for respiration. And then carbon dioxide comes back out of the cells, enters the capillaries and goes into the veins. So the veins are carrying the blood back up to the heart, and it's normally deoxygenated blood, because what happens then is the blood is pumped to the lungs where it's reoxygenated, re-enters the heart and goes all around the body again. So most veins carry deoxygenated blood. It's only the one that is coming back from the lungs that carries oxygenated blood. I hope that makes sense. All right. What sort of pressure do you think the blood is being carried at in the veins? What pressure do we think? And what do we think about what makes up the wall, and what about the lumen? Yeah, low pressure. Brilliant. Low or lower, certainly, than the arteries. Okay, brilliant. Well done, everybody. Now, the thickness of the wall, it's slightly thinner. So it has a thinner layer of muscle and elastic tissue. Now, because the blood is under lower pressure, the veins actually have a wider lumen. And the reason for this is the wider the lumen, the less blood is actually in contact with the side of the walls. And so there's less resistance for the blood to flow through, because as soon as it touches the walls, that's going to slow it down, all right? Because it's going to create drag, so it's going to slow the blood down. So what they want is the widest lumen possible, so that there is the least resistance to the flow of the blood. Because it's under low pressure, it's gone all the way around the body, it's gone through the capillaries, all right, so it's all slowed down and the pressure is much lower. And so if they had a narrow lumen, there'd be a lot more resistance. So it needs a wider lumen to reduce the resistance towards the flow of the blood, so the blood has got more chance of getting back up to the heart. Because if you think about it, you've got to get blood back up from your big toe back up to your heart. And if it's under low pressure, that's quite tricky. So we need to make it as possible. We try to make it as possible that it can get back to the heart. And there's lots of different ways it does this. So it has this wider lumen to reduce the resistance. And it also has things called valves. So veins have valves. And what happens is, for example, in your muscles, so here's your vein, it's very crude drawing, here's your vein, and here's your, say, calf muscles on each side. As you contract your muscles, they get shorter and fatter, which means they're going to push inwards onto the vein. And if it pushes inwards to the vein, it's going to push the blood upwards, all right? And so what we have inside our veins is we have these valves like this. So as the blood flows through, the valves open up and allow the blood to get pushed through by the muscles. But as the muscles relax, there's no longer any push on those veins to push the blood up. But these valves then just shut as the blood tries to drop down. And so the blood is caught inside these valves and they can't go any further down. It's a bit like a ratchet mechanism. And that's one of the reasons that when you go onto a plane, they say to stand up and walk around every so often. Otherwise, the blood doesn't get a chance to keep moving up your leg. So hopefully that makes sense about why we have these valves, okay? So the valves are there to help with the blood movement back up to the heart. So we've got a wider lumen to reduce the resistance or the friction, and then we've got the valves to stop the blood from falling back down the vein. Have you got any questions on that? Is that okay? Because some people find that quite tricky. All right, so now we're looking at capillaries. Now, somebody was talking about blood vessels which have a wall which is just one cell thick. Here we have it. We have the capillaries. So here we can see that that is a cell, isn't it? So it is only one cell thick. And they're microscopic. You can see them underneath the microscope. They're microscopic. So you can see them when you look at them on a slide, say, under the microscope. Has anybody got any idea what the purpose of capillaries are? So we've had arteries, which lead away from the heart. We've had veins, which carry the blood back to the heart. And the arteries connect the arteries, and the capillaries connect the arteries and the veins. So have we got any idea? Diffuse quickly, exchange of substances. Fantastic, brilliant answers there. So it's for exchange of substances. So in the tissues, the capillaries are the site of, they do gas exchange and also other substances such as glucose and wastes like carbon dioxide, all right, and urea. So any waste will come out of the cells into the capillaries, and the capillaries deliver oxygen and glucose to all the cells for respiration. So that's fantastic. So capillaries carry the blood through the tissues. So what happens is we have the arteries come down, then we have the capillary bed, and then the veins. All right. So what do you think about the blood pressure in capillaries? Because what we've had is we've had an artery, which then goes down into a smaller artery called an arteriole, and then it branches loads and loads and loads into all of these capillaries, making up a capillary bed. So has anybody got any idea? No, we won't be doing the tissue fluid today, all right? It can be quite a complicated topic, that, can't it? The tissue fluid. Right, well, medium, high. Actually, what happens, because even though an artery is, it's carrying a lot of blood, they then branch into lots of arterioles, which then branch into lots and lots and lots, thousands of capillaries, which means because you've got all of these branches, the blood pressure drops because it's basically divided between all of those capillaries. So we actually end up with very low blood pressure, very low blood pressure. All right. So as the blood comes into the capillaries, because it's branched so many times and the blood has been diverted into so many different places, the pressure drops. All right. So very low pressure, and it couldn't be under high pressure because the wall is only one cell thick. Do you remember when we were talking about high pressure in the arteries? The arteries have very thick walls to withstand that pressure. If the walls are only one cell thick, then those walls are going to rupture, and that's going to end up in disaster, isn't it? All right. So it has to be under low pressure because nothing else could be coped with in those capillaries. But it's because of this artery branching into an artery, lots of arterioles, which then divide into lots of capillaries. All right, so we're going to have a look at a capillary bed now. So here we go. Here's the artery. Here's the blood coming in. All right. And obviously the capillary bed is much bigger. It's got thousands and thousands and thousands of branches from it. All right, so the blood comes in. It goes through the artery, then through arterioles. Now, arterioles are just much smaller arteries. So you have the main arteries and then the branches off into the arterioles. And then we come to capillaries. Now, sometimes in biological diagrams, if they've got colour in them, red will represent oxygenated. So here it's oxygenated blood because it's delivering oxygen to the cells, and all the cells are found in the middle here, like this, all right? And over here is the deoxygenated blood, and that's represented in blue, all right? Because what's happening is the oxygen is passing into the cells, and then carbon dioxide is passing out of the cells into the blood, all right? And then it carries on. So it goes artery, arterioles, capillaries. Capillaries are where the exchange occurs. So exchange occurs at the capillaries. We have the oxygen and the glucose getting to the cells, carbon dioxide and other waste moving from the cells back into the blood. All right. And then, does anybody know what the name is for small veins? All right. So we've got arterioles, which are small arteries. So we have the large artery branches into the arterioles, which branch into the capillaries, which are just one cell thick, their walls. Then it goes into something else before it goes into veins. So has anybody got any idea what it is that they go into before they go back to veins? Small veins. Yes, well done, Flo. All right, venules. So it's a venule. So capillaries go into a venule, and then the venule into the vein. And then the vein carries the blood back up to the heart. All right, well done. So how are we feeling about this part, just about the blood vessels? Are you happy with this? 1, 2, or 3? Straightforward, all right, super confused. How are we doing? 1, good, excellent. Yeah, good. Oh, excellent. So we're all happy with this. So let's have a look at a couple of exam questions, shall we? Let's have a look at this first one. This is a really classic question. Compare the structure of an artery with the structure of a vein. And it's got 3 marks. So you have to make 3 main points. And this is structure, not function. All right. So it can't be about what it carries, under what pressure. It has to be about the structure of the actual blood vessels. All right. So can anybody come up with anything here? Oxygenated and deoxygenated blood mixing basically what happens is as the blood comes in through the capillary bed, that's when it's got the most oxygen in it. And then obviously it's a graduation as you go through the capillary bed. So you start with oxygenated and you've got lots of oxygen, and then the blood is basically giving up through tissue fluid. What's happening is oxygen is getting to the cells, and then the cells are giving up carbon dioxide, which then goes into the blood. So you've just got this gradual fading across. It doesn't just suddenly go oxygenated, deoxygenated. It's a gradual fading. All right. The arteries carry blood away from the heart and the veins carry blood to the heart. Yes, brilliant. But that's a function, not a structure. Okay. Veins have a large lumen. Yes, brilliant. Veins have a large lumen and the arteries have a narrower lumen. Brilliant. What about the walls? What can we come up with for the walls? Narrow lumen, yeah. The lumen is really important. So we have arteries have a narrower lumen. That will give us 1 mark. What else have we got? Thick elasticated walls. Good. So arteries have a thicker layer of muscle. That's 1 mark. And elastic tissue. That's another mark, because you've mentioned both of those different types of tissue. So if you mention each of those different types of tissue, you get a mark for each. Oh, good. Veins have valves. Veins have valves. Veins and valves. Veins have valves. Good. That's another good one. So you could get 1 mark for that. Obviously, we're looking for 3 marks, but yeah. Okay. Hi. Brilliant. Hopefully that's all okay for you. Right, so now let's have a look at the structure of the heart, shall we? We need to know what the point of the heart is. What does the heart do? What can anybody tell me about the heart? Anything about the heart? So here's a lovely structure. This is the outside of the heart. All right, so we've got these are blood vessels to the lungs, all right, and these are coming in from the lungs, and this is going to the body from the aorta. Pumps blood. Excellent. That's the most important thing, is that it pumps blood, circulates blood to our body. Excellent. So it's pumping blood. How does it pump the blood? What allows it to actually pump the blood? What is it made up of? Coronary arteries supply the heart muscles with oxygenated blood so it can pump the blood. Excellent. All right, so we've got coronary arteries supply the muscle. So these supply cardiac. Cardiac refers to heart, supplies cardiac muscle with oxygen and glucose. Good, well done. Muscle, excellent. And the name of those 3 main different types of muscle: skeletal, smooth, and cardiac. So this is made up of cardiac muscle. All right, cardiac muscle. And it is also made up of nervous tissue, which actually controls how it pumps. All right, so it controls the contraction of all of the chambers of the heart. So the nervous tissue is there, and basically the nervous tissue has its own little part that you may have heard called the pacemaker in the top left part of the heart, and what that top right hand part of the heart, and what that does is it sends electrical impulses across the heart, which makes it contract. All right, and the blue and red represent deoxygenated for blue, And red is oxygenated blood. Mentioned that earlier, didn't I? Does anybody know anything about the double circulatory system? What do we mean about the double circulatory system? We have a double circulatory system. Fish have a single circulatory system. Oxygenated, yes, good. Oxygenated blood. So does anybody know anything about the double circulatory system? What does it mean if we have a double circulatory system? Got two halves of this heart, haven't we? Travel through the heart twice, brilliant. The blood passes through the heart twice for every complete circulation, for every complete circuit of the body. Yeah, so we've got the left ventricle pumps oxygenated blood all around the body. Good. So we have one side just deals with the oxygenated blood and one side just happens to deal with the deoxygenated blood. So the oxygenated blood goes all the way around the body, delivers all the oxygen, then it returns to the heart, and then it's pumped to the lungs. So you have these two circulations, all right? The pulmonary circulation, pulmonary meaning lungs, so it goes to the lungs. So you've got your heart in the middle here, all right? And here's the lungs up here. And so you get one circulation to the lungs and one circulation to the body. So it goes through the heart twice for each complete circuit. So it goes oxygenated blood down to the body and then deoxygenated blood back to the heart, which then gets oxygenated in the lungs, which then passes it back into the heart. So you've got these two circulations. It goes through the heart twice for every complete circuit of the body. All right, well done, super work. So the blue side is deoxygenated blood from the body. It's in low concentration of oxygen and high concentration of carbon dioxide. The red represents the oxygenated blood pumped to the body, high in oxygen, low in carbon dioxide. So let's move on to the heart then. Now, this is a common simplified diagram of a heart. Some of you might not think it's that simple, but it is. This is a simplified version of the heart. Now, if you're AQA, you don't need to know the valve names, but OCR and EdXL do. So that's why I've put them in brackets. I will put them into brackets, the names of the valves, so that you understand that AQA don't need to know them. First of all, this is the left side. Whenever if I say to a student, if you enter the exam and you have a diagram of the heart, please straight away write down the correct sides of the heart. All right, before you do anything else on the diagram, write in left and right, because it's like you looking in the mirror. All right, your right hand side in a mirror looks like the left-hand side. Your left-hand side looks like the right-hand side in the mirror, because basically what you've done is the diagram is as if you've picked the heart up and put it inside yourself. So it's like you're looking in the mirror, all right? So your actual right side will look like the left-hand side in the mirror. Your left-hand side will look like your right-hand side in the mirror, all right? So it's the right and the left. So first of all, first thing you do is write down right and left, and then that will help stop complications when you're trying to explain the heart or you're trying to label the heart. So please try to take that as a top tip. All right. So here is a diagram of the heart. What I want you to do is tell me what these are to start off with. Does anybody know what those are? They're the top. You've got two halves of the heart, haven't you? The oxygenated side and the deoxygenated side. And then each side is divided into a top small chamber and a bottom larger chamber. What is the name of those top smaller chambers? Brilliant, the atria. All right, so this is the left atrium. Well done, everybody. And this is the right atrium. If you're looking at the plural name, atria is plural. So it's one atrium, two atria. So that's the top small chamber. What's the bottom large chamber called here? Okay, anybody got any idea what those bottom ones are? Ventricles, good. So we've got the left ventricle and the right ventricle. And this is why I say it's really important to put the left and right at the top. All right, so it's important to put the left and the right at the top of the diagram so that we can name them properly. So it's a left ventricle. Careful with the spelling, it's CLE, because some people get confused. So the atrium, the actual name of atrium, comes from the ancient word for an entrance hall. And that makes sense because that's where the blood enters the heart, into the atrium. So it's an entrance hall of a building, all right? And a ventricle just basically means something that holds something, all right? So the ventricle is holding the blood because it's going to push it out of the heart. Good. So we've got the ventricle. So now what we've got the blood entering. Let's start on the left-hand side, all right? So the blood enters the left atrium. Now, the left atrium is a small chamber, and what it does is it pushes the blood down into the left ventricle. So where does that blood come from? It's oxygenated blood. Where does the blood get oxygenated? So it's entering here and here. Where does that come from? Brilliant. The pulmonary vein, and you got that right. Pulmonary, okay, means lungs. And it's a vein because it's coming back to the heart. And the pulmonary vein is a very special vein because it's the only vein that carries oxygenated blood. All the other veins carry deoxygenated blood, but because this one is coming back to the heart from the lungs, it's the one that carries oxygenated blood. So the blood comes from the lungs. Well done, everybody. It comes from the lungs. All right. It enters via the pulmonary vein into the left atrium. The left atrium then contracts and pushes that blood down into the larger ventricles at the bottom. Now it goes through this little gap here, which are a bit like double doors, which are only open one way. All right. So, you know, those double doors that don't flap backwards and forwards, the ones that only open in one direction. That's what these valves are like. All right. So these are valves that separate the atria and the ventricles, and they're the same on both sides. Has anybody got any idea what they're called if they separate the atrium and the ventricles and their valves? So their type of valve, and then allow the blood to flow from the atria into the ventricles, but don't let it flow backwards. So has anybody got any idea what those are called if they separate the atrium and the ventricles? Quite tricky, aren't they, the names of the valves? So if they separate the atria or semi-lunar, that's the other one, but good. You remembered one of the valves flow. That's fantastic. All right, so I'll talk to you about the semi-lunar. So basically, they are known as the Atrioventricular valves because they separate the atria and the ventricles. So atrioventricular valves, and the same one is over there on the other side as well. So there are tricuspid and bicuspid. Yeah, you can call them tricuspid and bicuspid. We tend to use atrioventricular because it's more general, but yeah, left are bicuspid, right are tricuspid, and you remember that by calling it lab rat. All right, left, lab, R, bicuspid, B, so lab, rat, right, R, tricuspid. All right, got taught that by my daughter who's reading medicine at university, and she came up with lab rat, and I like that. So left R, bicuspid, right R, tricuspid. So if you want to use tricuspid and bicuspid, that's a way of remembering them. All right, or you can call them atrioventricular because they separate the atrium and the ventricles. Brilliant. All right, so now what we've got is the blood is then going up through the main artery that leaves the heart. Has anybody got any idea what the main artery up here is that leaves the heart? Artery, away, and it begins with A again. So arteries, away, and the main one begins with A, if anybody's got any idea. So the blood is going to go out through this to all around the body. Brilliant, the aorta. Now, Flo, you mentioned some valves for us, didn't you? Because what happens is the blood flows, as the ventricles contract, they push the blood up through the aorta. But as the ventricles relax, the blood is going to naturally want to fall back down into the ventricles. But then that isn't being very efficient, is it? Because then you've got blood flowing that way and then some of it's flowing backwards. So that's not a very efficient way of pumping the blood. So we have these other valves, all right? So the blood is being pushed up through the aorta. Well done, everybody. Pushed up through the aorta. And then as the ventricles relax, the blood tries to flow back down. So what happens is there's some other valves that shut. And these are in the shape of half moons. So half, semi, moon, lunar. So semi-lunar valves. If you're doing AQA, you don't need to know those names, but you do need to know those valves there. So semi-lunar valves. So the blood goes out through the aorta, carries oxygenated blood all the way around the body, delivers the oxygen, picks up the carbon dioxide, and then the blood comes back from the capillaries into the veins, back to the heart. Does anybody know this name of the main vein entering the heart? Okay, it's vein and V again, vein, valves, and so we've got arteries, away, or aorta, we've got veins, valves, vena cava. Excellent. So we've got the 3 V's and the 3 A's. Arteries, away, aorta, veins, valves, vena cava. Brilliant. Any way that you can try to remember this. So the blood comes back up through the vena cava. That bit comes from the head. This comes from the torso, and it enters into the right atrium. It's collecting the blood. It then pushes it down through the atrioventricular valves into the right ventricle, and then the right ventricle contracts and pushes the blood up through this artery. What artery is this if it's leading to the lungs? Lungs. It's leading to the lungs. It's the only artery that carries deoxygenated blood. So has anybody got any idea what this one's called? Brilliant. It is the pulmonary artery because it's going to the lungs. So it's going away from the heart to the lungs. It's carrying deoxygenated blood. That carbon dioxide will then diffuse into the alveoli of the lungs. The lungs then breathe it out, and oxygen from the alveoli diffuses into the blood, which is then carried back to the heart again through the pulmonary vein. And there we have it, the double circulation. All right. So the aorta is carrying that blood under high pressure. All right. So the ventricles contract, the blood goes into the aorta expands, all right, which is what you feel as a pulse. And then it recoils and helps push the blood along. The blood goes all the way around the body to the capillary beds where exchange occurs. Then the waste, carbon dioxide, etc., are carried by the veins back up to the heart. And then the deoxygenated blood is pumped to the lungs to get rid of the carbon dioxide and pick up more oxygen. Okay. So now what we have to see is how does this actually happen? So we've talked about this whole circulation, haven't we? Have you noticed, let me just get a different colour so I can show it to you, the difference in the thickness of the two walls? Remember, this is the left and this is the right. What do you notice about the difference in the thickness between the left-hand side and the right-hand side? And has anybody got any idea about the difference in thickness? So you've got the left-hand side, which is pumping blood all the way around the body, and the right, which is pumping it to the lungs. Can anybody tell me about the thickness of the walls? So the left is thicker. Brilliant. So the left ventricle has a thicker, more muscular wall because, yeah, much thicker. All right, so this has a thinner wall over here. Yeah, brilliant. So where does the left-hand side pump it? So why does it need to have a thicker wall? What's going to happen? Yeah, it pumps it at higher pressure. Brilliant. It needs to contract. Good word, contract, because it's a muscle. It needs to contract powerfully to pump blood all the way round, even to your big toe, all the way around the body. So it's going to have to be under high pressure. And to get that high pressure, we need more muscle to put more force in. All right. Whereas on this side, okay, the ventricles are only pumping to lungs. All right. So it's pumped into the ventricles, which pumps blood to the lungs on this side. Sorry, I've just put that one in the wrong place. All right. So getting excited. All right. So after the blood fills the atria, it's pumped into the ventricles, where it's then pumped out of the heart. And so the heart, the left ventricle has a much thicker wall than the right-hand side because this one's only pumping it to the lungs. And if it pumped it under high pressure, so the lungs are right next to the heart. If it pumped it under as high a pressure as the left-hand side, what happens is all those capillaries in the lungs could get damaged, all right? Because remember, the capillaries have only got a wall which is 1 cell thick. So if the pressure is too high, it would just rupture the capillaries in the lungs, which would cause a real problem. Whereas the left-hand side pumps it all the way around the body, so it needs it under high pressure. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. So now we can have a quick look at the valves. All right, so the valves, like we said, prevent the backflow of blood. Either in the heart, the semi-lunar ones, stopping the blood from going back into the ventricles, but also in the veins, okay, it stops the backflow. So here we go. Here's if your muscles contract and help push the blood upwards, then as the muscles relax, the blood isn't going to fall right back down to your big toe because the valve's shut. All right. Now, hopefully a lot of you have heard about cardiac output. You may have heard about it if you do PE, or if you're just interested in exercise as well. So cardiac output is the volume is a more accurate word, I suppose. So cardiac output is the volume of blood pumped from the heart in a minute. So cardiac output is basically how much blood is pumped out of the heart every minute. So the way we work it out is we need to work out what volume of blood is pumped in one beat and how many beats your heart does in 1 minute, if that makes sense. So this is known as the stroke volume to start off with. So stroke volume is the volume of blood pumped in each beat. So each time your heart pumps, what is the volume of the blood that is pumped out? And then over here is your heart rate, which you can do by counting your pulse. It's normally between 60 and 80 beats per minute. And you can find that in your neck or in your wrist. So cardiac output is the volume of blood pumped in 1 beat of the heart. And then you multiply it by the number of beats in a minute, and that gives you the volume of blood per minute. All right, that makes sense, doesn't it? So heart rate then, heart rate is measured in beats per minute. And you may have seen this, BPM. All right. Now, I mentioned the pacemaker earlier, didn't I? All right. So if you think about the heart like this, okay, and this is the left-hand side, and this is the right-hand side. What you have is you have this little set of nervous cells up in the right atrium. So it's a group of cells located, and you might have heard of pacemakers, I hope. Have you heard of pacemakers? So a group of cells located in the right atrium that acts as a pacemaker. Now, it naturally sends out a regular pulse itself. It doesn't need to be interfered with by the brain. However, it can be regulated by the brain and hormones. All right, so you can slow your heart rate down and you can speed it up. So if you need more oxygen to your cells because you're exercising, then it can be sped up. If you're scared, it will speed up because adrenaline will affect it. All right. So here we have age, and then we've got the resting heart rate, what the normal is. All right. But 60 to 80 beats per minute is quite normal. All right, I just sped up a little bit because we're near the end. Hopefully that makes sense. If there's any questions, please ask me. How confident are you feeling? Are you all happy with this? Because then we can go on to have a quick look at an exam, a couple of exam questions. Yeah. So let's have a look at this first question then. All right. The heart is good. So you're kind of there, but there's a few. Please do ask if you need anything. So the heart is part of the circulatory system. What type of tissue is the wall of the heart made of? And then which two blood vessels carry deoxygenated blood? So is it number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5? So you need to tick 2 of those. Give me the numbers. And you need to give me the type of tissue in the heart. What is that heart muscle called? Muscle tissue. Good. So it's cardiac. Try to be as specific as possible. Cardiac muscle. All right. And yeah, cardiac tissue, muscle tissue. Cardiac muscle is perfect. And which two blood vessels carry deoxygenated blood? What have we got there? We've got the pulmonary artery, and because that is taking the blood back up. Yeah, 2 and 5. Well done. Yeah, fantastic. So it's 2 because it's the pulmonary artery is leaving the right-hand side of the heart and carrying the blood to the lungs to get reoxygenated. And the vena cava is bringing the blood back to the heart from all around the body. So it's 3 and 5. Excellent. Oh. And then we've got the stroke volume is the amount of blood leaving one chamber of the heart per beat. From which chamber of the heart does this volume of oxygenated blood flow? So from which chamber of the heart does this volume of oxygenated blood flow? It flows from the left ventricle. And then cardiac output is a measure of the amount of blood pumped from the heart each minute. Calculate using the following formula the cardiac output. So cardiac output is 4.9 litres per minute equals the stroke volume is 0.0 litres, and then times it by the heart rate. So to get the heart rate, we need to do 4.9 divided by 0.07. Because all we do is we take that onto that side. And if it's timesing on that side, it needs to divide on that side. So what we end up with is 70 beats per minute. So 4.9 divided by 0.07 is 70. Sorry, we had to rush that last bit, but we're running out of time. All right. So describe the structure and function of veins, arteries, and capillaries. We have done that now. Describe the circulation of blood around the body. We have done that. And we've described the structure and function of the human heart. And hopefully you have found that useful. Don't forget the upcoming web classes. All right, there's maths, chemistry, physics. And the next one I'm doing is pathogens and viral diseases at the beginning of December. All right. Take care, everybody, and I hope you enjoyed the lesson.